everyone, welcome to me and Grok in the kitchen. Today I want to talk about how to make meatballs with pasta sauce in the crock pot. I've had a couple of requests from people to do a video on how to make meatballs, and so this is my go-to recipe. I pretty much use it for everything. So the first thing you can see is I've got my bowl and my ingredients. I've got about 1.5 pounds of ground burger. I've got a cup of Parmesan cheese, a cup of milk, a teaspoon of garlic powder, a teaspoon of oregano, a teaspoon of salt, and a half a teaspoon of pepper. I also have one package of butter crackers, and you can use whatever kind you want. It doesn't have to be anything like these. They don't have to be shaped like this. You'll see why in a second. I get them open. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a panade. And a panade is basically some kind of bread or cracker with milk or some other kind of liquid. And it makes kind of like a paste. And the reason we're doing that is because when we put that in with the burger, it's going to help keep everything moist. And a lot of people say that the problem that they have with their meatballs is that they're very dry and that kind of stuff. So this is going to help correct that problem. So I'm going to just get in there with my hands and I'm going to crunch these crackers all up. Okay. So you can see I've crunched them up pretty good. There's big pieces, little pieces, that kind of stuff. That's okay. Doesn't matter because the next thing I'm going to do is add in my milk. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to let these crackers soak in this milk for a little bit. And the crackers are going to soak up all of that moisture. And that's exactly what we want because if it soaks up all the moisture, it's going to transfer that moisture to your meatballs. Now, the other thing that I do here is that because I'm using dried herbs for this and a powder, I'm actually going to add both my garlic powder and my dried oregano right to this mix. And the reason why I'm doing that is because remember that spices and herbs will bloom when they're exposed to different liquids or oil or something like that. And so this is going to give my herbs an opportunity to kind of loosen up and become, well, less dry. And that also will help with your meatballs because the less moisture that you take out, the better off you are. Okay, I'm going to let this just sit for a minute and come back in a few minutes. And once it's absorbed some of that moisture, I'm going to use a fork and kind of crush it up and make a little paste. Okay, so it's been a couple of minutes and you can see that it's really starting to soak up. Those crackers are really starting to soak up that milk and it's getting much more thicker and we can now start to crush those crackers a little bit more. You don't really want a big piece of cracker in your meatballs. This is mostly just to help bind your meatballs together without making them dry and also give those herbs and that garlic powder a chance to get rehydrated. Okay, so now I've got a couple of these other ingredients I want to take and make a couple of comments about. First of all, a hamburger. Notice my hamburger is a little brown on the top. That's because it's been exposed to air. But if you look inside, it's got plenty of pink. So there's nothing wrong with this hamburger. It smells great. Don't be afraid of your hamburger. In fact, I tend to think that these kinds of things are a little bit better when they're at this point. So in goes my hamburger. In goes my ground Parmesan. Now, I always have a fairly large container of Parmesan cheese hanging out in my refrigerator, and that's because I use Parmesan cheese a lot. I grate mine. I buy it in big blocks. I cut it up. I put it in my food processor, let it go for a few minutes, and it grinds itself. It grates itself. You don't have to do that part. Just go to the store and buy it in a bag that's already grated. Do not get the stuff that's in the little container. There's a lot of fillers and additives in that stuff, and that's not what you're looking for. That stuff will affect the taste of your meatballs. So go for the real stuff. It's really not that expensive to just buy it in a little bag. You can get one, it's in 1 to 2 cups, and it's really worth it to just use the real stuff instead of the stuff that's in the can. So 1 cup of Parmesan cheese goes right in. Then I'm also going to add my teaspoon of salt and my pepper. Then nice clean hands. I know it looks icky. You got to like playing with your food, but you're not looking to over mix your meatballs. It is okay if you squish it some. Try to remember that that panade is going to put more moisture back into your meatballs. So this working your meatballs a little bit more is kind of okay because we're going to keep that texture that we would normally be missing. And you don't want your meatballs to fall apart. So really just make sure that it's all together really nicely. Okay, I'm going to quick wash my hands and be right back. Okay, now we're getting to the forming of the meatball stage. So I've got my bowl of meatballs here, and I've also got a tray, and you can see that I've put a piece of parchment on it. You can actually buy parchment paper pre-cut to the size of your cookie sheet. So if you make a lot of cookies or use your cookie sheet for a lot of things, even roasting vegetables, it is so worth the buy. You can get them for like 100 in a container, and they're not expensive. I like it because it makes it easy to take things back off. Things don't stick to the pans, even though I have a fairly high-end pan here. I always use this. This is my scoop that I use, and it's just regular, not too big, not too small kind of scoop. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to just scoop out my meatballs, and I'm just flat. I want to mention here as I'm doing this, I know I do this stuff kind of fast. It's only because I have been doing this a really long time, and I have this thing about wasting my time. So I tend to go kind of fast, but I want to say that cooking in general for me is very relaxing. It's therapeutic for me. I really enjoy doing it. I'm going to have to. The other reason that we're scooping these is so that the meatballs are all about the same size, and therefore they will all cook about the same time, which is what you want. Remember that rule where, make sure what you're cooking is relatively the same size so that you don't have big pieces and little pieces. Now you can see I did not neatly end up with neat little rows. That's okay. It's not going to matter in the long run. So I'm just going to find a space on my pan, plunk them in there, get all of that deliciousness out of the bowl. 2 more here maybe. Now, I've just wet my hands a little bit. I'm doing that so that these don't stick. But now I'm going to just go back through, and I'm going to roll these into kind of balls. You'll see here as I do this, obviously not perfect, but B, I'm starting to create a little more space on my pan, so I'm not too worried about down here because I'm going to create that space. Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 5 times 6 is 30, plus 2 is 32 meatballs, which is great because you figure for most spaghetti and meatball type meals, you figure 4 meatballs per person. So this will feed 8. Don't worry that there's going to be leftovers if there's just a couple of you, because this stuff saves great in the refrigerator for up to a week once it's in the sauce and cooked, and you can freeze it really, really well. It makes really excellent meatball sandwiches. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and I'm going to put this in the refrigerator, and I'm going to just let this chill. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to get set up and we'll talk about the pasta sauce. Okay, So those meatballs do not have to chill very long. We're just trying to get them to chill up a little bit, get away from the heat of my hands, that kind of stuff. Just the right amount of time for us to make the sauce that we're going to actually cook them in. I know, crazy, right? I'm not bringing out a frying pan, not frying a damn thing. I'm going to just put those meatballs right in my spaghetti sauce, put them on low, let them cook all day, and they're going to be delicious. So let's talk about that sauce. I have to put in my bowl about 64 ounces of tomatoes. Now, so you can see as you're looking here that they're chunky. I happen to prefer to buy whole peel tomatoes and use my scissors and cut the tomatoes up, or you can get in there with your clean hands, squish them. That's always fun. You can also do things like diced tomatoes and what have you. See, there's a really big chunk. I didn't do a good job cutting one. You can also use diced tomatoes, but the reason why I like the whole peeled tomatoes is because in the scope of all of the things that you can buy for tomato products in a can, these are the least processed, which means that for people like my husband who has some sensitivities to the acids in tomatoes, there's less of it. You also retain a lot more nutrition this way. And in some cases, depending on what you get and what brand you get, you actually get a little bit of a metallic taste. So if you can, go for the whole peeled tomatoes and just get in there and cut them up or squish them up yourself, or go with the diced tomatoes again, but you got to be careful about what kind of brand you have. Here we go. This is super simple. Right into the crock pot. Get all that deliciousness out and ready to go. Okay, to this, I'm going to add the equivalent of probably, if you're using fresh garlic, I would probably use 4 cloves. I am actually using freeze-dried sliced garlic, something I make myself. You can also use garlic powder if that's all you have. Just use like maybe a half to 3/4 of a teaspoon if that's all you have. You can use the pre-diced up stuff that you can get in a jar. Feel for the minced. Feel free to use that. Again, just use, no more than a teaspoon of that. Remember, with dried, it's going to soak up some of the moisture in here. It's going to let the stuff out. These are more potent than if you use any of the others, including fresh, right in. I'm also going to add about 3 tablespoons of Italian seasoning, which looks to be just about all I got left in this jar. Okay. Now, you can use just oregano. You can use whatever kind of herbs you want. Remember, Italian seasoning's got a lot of stuff in it: basil, parsley, all kinds of stuff. So lots bang for your $3 to buy a jar of this. And then the one last thing I'm going to do is, because my husband does have a sensitivity to the acids, is I'm going to take just a little tiny pinch of baking soda. And I'm going to just add that in there. And look, it's so tiny, you almost can't see it. Now, the reason why I do that is because baking soda will actually change the alkalinity in my tomatoes. Unlike sugar, which it'll do the same thing, but it makes it sweet. I don't like sweet tomato sauce. So I use the baking soda very, very tiny little bit, changes it all up. Then I'm going to just stir this around, get all of my herbs in, get my garlic in. All right, and that's where I'm going to go with that. Now, doesn't look like a lot for those meatballs, but trust me, this is going to come out perfect. Okay, so now I have my meatballs. These have been in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes. I wouldn't skip this step. You probably could, but I wouldn't, because the purpose of actually doing it is to make the meatballs a lot easier to handle. And you're going to put them into this one pot all together. So you want to make sure that you can make them get them in here without making a mess and making them break up. And with that, stick them right in there. Notice the level of my sauce is going up as I put things in. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Stick them right down in there. Don't be afraid. Bunch them up. Get them right in there, however they'll fit. I know, it looks like I'm squishing them. I'm not really, because as it comes up, more room is being made underneath. There, and my last couple. Now, also keep in mind, as we do this, that these will get smaller. The meatballs will get smaller as you cook them. So, there we go. Looks like a mess, doesn't it? Don't worry, it's gonna be delicious. Just trust me. Okay, so I'm just gonna put the cover on this. I'm gonna put it in my crock pot on low. I'm gonna let it go all day long. 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. Believe it or not, it won't matter. These meatballs are gonna come out nice and tender no matter how long you cook them. Unless, of course, you cook them for 24 hours. And I'm not so sure. I've never done that. But if you don't have that much time, it's noontime, you got to have supper on the table by 5, put them on high instead of low. They'll still be done. They won't be overcooked, and they will still come out nice and tender and nice and moist. Okay, so here we are about 5 hours later, and my pasta is all done. What I've done is just boiled some angel hair pasta in this particular case. A little salt in the water and just boiled it up till it was al dente. Spoon my stuff over it. These are the meatballs. Look at how lovely they look. Now, I will say this particular tomato sauce is a little chunky. I happen to like it that way. You can use whatever you want for a tomato product here, except perhaps tomato sauce. That's going to be too thin for what you're looking for. You can use jarred sauce if that's something that you like, and still put it in the crock pot. You're just cooking the meatballs in the sauce. Also be aware that it's probably going to be a little bit fat on the top. That's because the fat in the beef is going to come out. Just skim it off. It's not a big deal. Here I've got some of my Parmesan cheese. I'm going to go ahead and just garnish a little bit with that. Don't worry, I'm not going to put it all on because that would be bad, right? Anyway, I'm going to serve this up with a nice piece of garlic bread and a Caesar salad, and it's going to be a fabulous supper for us tonight. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I appreciate you tuning in. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up in the video, down below the video, and please, I would appreciate it if you would follow me on social media at Me and Grok in the Kitchen. Again, lovely to have you. Hope you enjoy these meatballs. I know that my family does every time I make them. And remember, that's because life is too short to eat bad food.